So welcome everybody to our Food Safety Live 2020. I'm a long time speaker. I think this is about my 6th year. I've been hanging out with Simon for quite a while now. Now the talk that I am going through today is looking at some modern learning options to educate and upskill your food handlers. That is the gist of my training, and what the session will actually focus on today is looking at reviewing these latest techniques and having a look at, with these techniques, we want to look at training staff that does a few key things. It fosters engagement, there's skill enhancement involved, and knowledge retention. So that is going to be our focus. We also have a few learning outcomes. Anyone who's done my trainings before knows I always throw in learning outcomes. This is what I expect you to know by the end of this session today, and that will be to explain the benefits of a well-trained team. So start having a think about that now, because I'm going to ask a question in the chat box about that shortly. Identify 3 different learning styles. So this is how people actually learn. And then we're also going to have a look at those latest techniques used to educate and train your food handlers. So for anyone who has not met me before, as Simon said, my name is Amanda Evans-Lara from HACCP Mentor. I've been doing this gig for quite a while now, going on around about 28 years. My key focus nowadays is really on training and educating QA and food safety professionals around the world. I do that through HACCP Mentor website. I started my life as a food inspector working for the government, and then started my own consultancy business. So my main focus these days, as I said, is training. I've been a SQF auditor, BRC auditor, and all of those other major GFSI standards. I do a lot of contract work for BRC now, looking at writing different trainings for them, and contributing to writing trainings and updating trainings. So if you've experienced the gluten-free or the plant-based training, I worked on both of those projects. So that's a little bit about me. As Simon said, I'm from Australia, so I'm sorry, I'll try and not speak too fast, and hopefully you can understand my accent. Okay, so the first question I want to ask is, what do you believe is the purpose of training? So if you can just write in the chat box for me, so we can get a bit of an idea of what you think the purpose of training is. To encapsulate all of those comments that have been coming in, we can break it down into these 4 things. Increase your level of awareness, increase your skill, increase motivation to perform well, so these are of all of your staff, and to increase overall productivity and performance. So it does have a major impact on your actual business when you have well-trained staff. So they're the main purpose of why we want to do training within our business. Now, one of the other reasons is what drives a lot of training is this whole requirement for compliance. So maybe where you're located, there may be written in your food laws that you have to meet certain education and training requirements, and these have all been written in the regulations or the food compliance laws. So there are some people who just do training because the law says they have to. They can't see the other benefits in it, like Zena just said, decrease employee turnover. That's a great one. So a lot of people will just do it because the law says, but what we want to do is expand beyond just what the law says. So we've got that part of it, and then we've also got the other driver is our third-party certification standards. So these could be, I've got a heap up there, which is the GFSI standards there. Fresh Care, I've missed that one off the list. They're a new provider. You've also got all of those other customer standards. Say if you're supplying to McDonald's, KFC, Walmart, Sainsbury's, all of those kind of those bigger retailers will also, or they may also have their own individual compliance standards, and as a general rule, training is written into all of those standards as well. So when we start looking at a couple of these things, people have been coming through saying really what the benefits of a well-trained team are, and we've had comments around there's a greater job satisfaction, improved staff morale, motivated employees. So when you've got motivated employees, just by nature, you will get increased efficiency in your process and work. And also as a side effect, there will be an enhanced workplace wellness, because I truly believe that if people know what they're doing, they're going to perform a lot better, and they're going to be a lot happier. So at this point in time, we have a lot of traditional training methods. Now a lot of these training methods can be, there's problems around the traditional of massive classroom-based training. And we've actually seen out of this whole COVID debacle, there has been a real shift in, to a degree, the way that some of the training is occurring. Some of the training has now gone online through virtual classrooms and things like that. I know that I'm training a lot more virtual classrooms through the stuff that I do. I was doing it before anyway, so it wasn't a massive jump for me, but you can't really treat a virtual classroom like you would a in-person classroom. It just doesn't work yet. You've got to make amendments to the way, if you're a trainer, to the way that you're doing that training. But what we have also found with those traditional training methods, they're very linear, as in they go in one direction. You have to learn this before you learn that. There's no room for jumping around anywhere. A lot of the times people may feel a lot of information overload, especially when you're condensing, you might be at a 3-day course, or, a 3-day HACCP course, or a 2-day HACCP course, or even if anyone's done the auditing course, it's lead audit is 5 days. So that can all be quite overwhelming for a lot of people. There's a lot of time involved in these traditional training methods. Not only is there the time to attend, you've got the time to travel. If you're away from the office, so that's downtime for you not being in your factory or in your workplace, on top of going away and doing the training as well. Not generally self-directed, which means someone's telling you what you have to learn. You don't really have a choice around actually filling in your particular knowledge gaps. And the other thing is it's often synchronous, which means that learners and instructors are in the same place at the same time for that training to take place, and we're all going through it at the same pace, regardless of what level of knowledge you have. So when we start thinking about some of the solutions for addressing this type of training, one of the other things, we can't go and do the in-person training as well because of the COVID restrictions in many countries. So that becomes a bit of a problem. So when we start looking at how we're going to solve these issues, some of the key things that I want to look at is having training that's tailored to each individual, as in it's going to suit what you know in your current knowledge gaps. Just-in-time training, which basically means micro training. You're just getting what you need without all the other fluff that goes on with it. Just give me the information. And I'm very much a person like that, is just tell me what I need to know. There's a real emphasis towards resources, not courses. So a lot of this is driven by the younger generation coming through. If they want to know something, they just look it up. They just look up a certain question, they get the knowledge, they move on. So it's using resources to be able to get that knowledge rather than this whole structured process. Now, I'm not saying that courses are irrelevant, because they're not, because you need courses when you need to do the whole deep dive on a lot of subjects. But we're talking about things that can just give you quick off the cuff answers. Integrate training into the workflow. So we want to make training accessible in the workplace. That's good training, it's relevant, it's timely, and it's of a time frame that doesn't take away from what you're doing actually in your workspace. Okay, so having a look at some of the new techniques that we have now. Now these have kind of come out in the last 12 to 18 months, and I know for a lot of my online training I have started adapting or rewriting a lot of my training to take on board a lot of these new techniques. So the three we're going to have a look at is adaptive learning. Francis, we're going to get to, how are you going, Francis? We are going to get to learning style, so hold up there. Adaptive learning is the first technique. Short sims is the next one, and then we've also got micro learning. So if you haven't heard of adaptive learning before, adaptive learning really is training that's tailored to the understanding, skills and interests of each individual person. The reason why we're interested in this type of learning is because really some people become bored quite quickly because they already know what's been described, or they think they know what's been described. Others tend to become confused because the information doesn't really connect to their current level of understanding. And then we've got other people who might just latch onto a few pieces of information and then miss the rest. And then you've got others who are not off. So hopefully in today's trainings or the presentations, nobody's going to nod off. We've got, like, HACCP refresher training is a great example of this. You may be a, professional who's been doing HACCP for the last 20 years, and every 3 years you have to go through and do your HACCP refresher training. Not too much has changed in HACCP over the last 10, 15 years, methodology-wise or principle-wise, but it's how you go and adapt that or put that into play in the context of these major GFSI standards. Maybe if you've got to do annual refresher training for WHS, that might be another example of where you quickly become bored because you already know what they're talking about and nothing's really changed. So we've got some of these benefits around adaptive learning. Is we're trying to avoid less boredom and confusion. So we don't want people to have to sit through training that's not beneficial, because if it's not beneficial, it's a waste of time and it's also a waste of money. I'm really, I probably get really annoyed. There's a lot of people that I train for who have these restrictions on, you have to train, this course has to be trained for say 16 hours or 8 hours, when a lot of the time, depending on the people who are in your class, you can get through that course in half of the time just because of what their level of knowledge is. So we need to start thinking about this when we're doing adaptive learning, instead of trying to put everybody into the same group and having to sit through, minutes upon minutes upon minutes of stuff or hours and hours of stuff where they don't really need to. Another benefit is this greater retention. So when you don't have to slog through the training that isn't relevant, you actually get to pay more attention to what is relevant, and you will actually be more engaged by this information. So of course this will automatically result in a greater retention. It gives you more joy because adults like to be in control. You actually get to control what you see and what you do. You can take as long as you like or as short as you like. You can base it on, yes, I know this, or I want to learn a bit more about that. So in that frame, it does make us happier when we've got control. And our fourth side of it, it's actually easier around the instructional design process to put together adaptive learning. So instead of trying to make one course for all of the masses who work in your organisation, you can actually just tailor certain things for certain groups. And of course, that's going to take up less time. So to give you a pictorial representation of how this process would work, in this webinar, I don't really have time to go into the depths of how to make this work, but this is just a brief overview where you can see the flow chart on the screen there, where you start. A good way to test is think you know the content, yes, go through the decision tree, take out the assessment. If you get through the assessment, no problems, you can then just go on and take the final exam. You don't need to then sit through each of the different training modules going through each of the things. And you can cop out at any time. If you're feeling proficient around a particular topic, you can opt out then to take your test and then see whether you end up being, at that point with your knowledge that you can take the final test. So I think this is a great way to kind of start tailoring things to people's knowledge. Now, this can be something that you do with your on-the-job training as well. It doesn't have to be online training or other formal face-to-face. You can actually do this through, just little worksheets or something like that. Okay, our next one is short sims. Now, these are one of my favourite ones that I've been introduced to in the last probably 6 months, and I'm absolutely loving them. So short sims are really a new type of educational media where people learn by making a series of interesting and relevant decisions, and based on those you do get feedback. So some of you may have experienced simulations before in online training, but these ones are actually just focusing on one point only, not expanding it out to the entire course, but you're just learning one particular topic and that's it. So you can also incorporate short sims into your actual adaptive learning. Now, I've got an example of a short sim, done a speed video on this, and you can kind of see as we go through, you answer the questions, there's drag and drop. It'll tell you if you're filling this one's actually around completing a form or a food safety form in the business. Each time someone makes a good or the right response, they'll get a accolade. If they get the wrong response, Jed gets a bit cranky that he doesn't get the right response. So that was a really quick example of a sim. Now, if you actually want to play with that sim and do it yourself, you can, if you head over to haccpmentor.com/resources, I've actually put that up there for you to go through and have a play, just because we don't have time to go through it in full today. You may think that building a sim is quite hard, but it's actually not hard. It is really around, you can build whatever sim you want within your business. It could be any process that you want to train your staff in. You can sketch out what you want the learner to know and what choices they could go with, and then include any of the type of feedback as you go through asking these questions. It's a good idea to make things interactive as possible by putting in actions, click objects, insert hyperlinks, things like that. And one of the easiest tools that you can use, and a majority of people do have access to Microsoft PowerPoint, so that is a good starting point to start building a sim. And you don't need to have an LMS or anything like that to run these sims. You can just run them on a computer and you can have your staff go ahead and do them there. So again, if you hop over onto the resources page of HACCP Mentor, I've got a webinar coming up soon around how to build one of these sims in PowerPoint. Our next and our final technique that we'll be going through in this course is micro-learning. So micro-learning has been around a little while, but it's about understanding other ways that you can deliver that micro-learning that you may not have thought about before. So it's all about breaking down whatever the information is you're trying to convey into topical bite-sized chunks. You don't want to overwhelm people. Now, you may have heard of things like, toolbox talks. You can do through posters. these are all considered to be micro-learning. Q&As, flip cards, even just part of your online training. You can just train in one point of learning that you want to get across to people. For a lot of my consultancy clients, we do actually implement this type of stuff through mini videos. So think about what you like to watch on social media. It'll be those really, quick, entertaining videos. No, they're normally under 2 minutes, those taste videos. I actually love those taste videos to be able to watch how to make something. So think about that if you were going to put together some type of micro learning. So these mini videos, they're great. You can put them up in your intranet. If your company has an intranet, you can send the links out to your staff to just access them off your server. Make them part of your training system. You've also got toolbox talks. So 1-point topics that you have a look at during, at the start of the shift, or maybe you do a lunchtime topic. So you see Simon does the Food Safety Fridays. So it's a similar concept to that, but we're just breaking it down to under 5 minutes. We want to keep them short and sweet and just focus on one topic. So we're not really doing the deep dive every single time. We're just focusing on one part. You can put resource folders together. So I love this one because you just put all of your, let's say, brochures or whatever, I call them food safety moments, and have them in a folder in the lunchroom. And then when people are sitting having their lunch, they can flick through and have a look at those things. So I've got a heap of food safety moments that you can access as well. The toolbox talks, we call these food compliance briefs. That's another way that you can send over or put out this micro learning. There's so many different things. I've even had a client that we've implemented the videos. They have a TV in their lunchroom, and we just loop the videos, all different micro trainings all day. So whoever's in the lunchroom can just, when they're having their lunch, they can just sit up and watch it. There's no sound to it. It's just all visual. So it is reading. This is where good graphics and large text comes in handy. That's just a couple of ideas of how you can go through and deliver those micro trainings. But just think, don't get caught up in that you have to do this 16-hour course to deliver information. You don't have to. It can be on all different ways. Another client, we actually put our little food safety moment posters on the back of the toilet door. So when people go to the toilet and they're sitting there, they're reading a food safety tip, that really goes through and reinforces maybe something that they've learned in more structured training. Whichever of these methods that you choose to go, you can do a mix. You don't have to just do one or the other. You can actually have a blended model of training within your organisation depending on what you're trying to get your staff to understand. But just keep in mind the different learning styles of people. You're going to have visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. So our visual learners, obviously, they like to see graphs and charts and pictures, and they like to be able to relate things like that, just a few key words. Auditory learners like to hear things, so you can actually transfer your training to sound files that people can listen to. You can have it going through their headphones. And then you've got the kinesthetic learners who are really hands-on, and they really like that when learning new material. So that's where those the short sims come in handy, because they actually get to do something, and they choose their own path, which is a great way to go through and learn. As a wrap up, I'm just about at my time. That's what we've gone through in my session. Explained the benefits of well-trained team, explored the different techniques or the latest techniques that we can use to educate and train our food handlers. And then we've also gone through and identified 3 different learning styles. Again, there's that web address if you're looking for other resources and to get on and have a play with that sim, the short sim that I showed you. You can get in and have a go as much as you want to have a go at it, just to see how that actually goes through and works. Thank you everybody for joining in on today's webinar. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop me a line at help@haccpmentor.com.